Hi there, my name is Tyler Groh and I'm the music composer for The Legend of Pirates Online, and today I'm excited to bring you along on an exclusive journey on how we brought the Kraken's Wake expansion to life. Let's get into it. So if you're new here, The Legend of Pirates Online, or Tlopo for short, is a fan-run MMORPG carrying the torch of an old Disney Pirates of the Caribbean online game. And for the 10th anniversary, the devs shipped Kraken's Wake, which is the biggest update by far the game has ever seen in its entire history. It features tons of new content like a brand new quest, brand new maps like Kraken's Lair, awesome new legendary cursed weapons, and yes, you guessed it, the Kraken and Davy Jones himself. So there were so many different moving parts that were happening behind the scenes to be able to make this update happen. One of them was that the Kraken actually took 3 years to make. I will be honest, a lot of people said we couldn't do it. I'm pretty sure the community at one point said we couldn't do it. I'm pretty sure some people on our team were like, yeah, I don't know if we can actually do that. Off-putting you, right? Putting you at ease, like this is never gonna happen. Well, guess what? We were messing with you. We could do it the entire time. We were just working on it and taking our time. There were a lot of people involved in the dev team to be able to make it happen. One person in particular that really grinded on the Kraken. This developer is one of the most kindest people that I have ever spoken to, and he has just such a knowledge about him and a passion to this game that is unrivaled. It was thanks to him that this Kraken is here today, and I'm thrilled to be able to share with you the story of how I got involved with this update, how I did the music composition for the Kraken boss battle sequence, how I brought in an amazing engineer who has an awesome Atmos home setup to be able to mix the music professionally. That has never been done before in Tlopo. We've never had the music professionally mixed before to this scale. I was able to help us bring in a sound design team to do original new sound design for the game. And not only that, we were able to bring in Davy Jones himself. My good friend Jonathan Leiter is a professional voice actor in the industry, and I've been pushing for Jonathan to join this team for so long. It's been a long time coming, since 2019 specifically. 2019 specifically, I've been rooting for this man to come into the game. We were able to finally convince the devs to make it happen. This update was just serendipity, all enclosed into one. Because when the devs finally reached out and they were like, let's do the Kraken Wake update, I was like, we got to get Davy Jones in there. And they're like, well, you know, let's hear what he does. And today, 2025, I can finally say Jonathan Leiter is our voice actor for Davy Jones in The Legend of Pirates Online. I am extremely happy that Jonathan is here today to be able to share with you his story of how he got involved with this update and his workflow. And yes, he will show you how he gets into character for Davy Jones. So let's go talk to the captain of the Flying Dutchman himself.
Hey there, I'm Jonathan Leiter, the voice of Davy Jones in The Legend of Pirates Online Kraken's Wake expansion. And I'm here doing a little Q&A session to share my journey, share my process, and some questions from out there in the fandom. So the voice of Davy Jones is obviously Bill Nighy, the actor. And when you're listening to him in the films, he has a range of different styles of vocalization that he has. He has a deeper guttural sound for the serious moments. He has a voice that he uses more in At World's End when he's in the ship talking to Cutler Beckett. And he's very matter of fact. He's a lot less scary in those moments. So he's very matter of fact. He's almost awkward and uncomfortable. And then you have the moments where he's more frantic, he's more animated, he's yelling at his crew members, or he's screaming at Jack in that, introductory scene. So I had to take all of those into consideration, and it's built around a Scottish accent, but it's a Scottish accent with some very particular nuances, and I had to take all of those into consideration. And I've actually attempted a Davy Jones voice twice before, and I say twice before because I did videos on him before on my YouTube channel. Now, the first one was way back in like 2007, maybe 2006. And that video in particular, I have my thumb over my top lip because I thought the voice needed to cover up that lip to get more of the particular sound where the lip hits a lip that doesn't exist. Because you only see the bottom lip moving, and then it hits this on the top, and it makes it easier to get that sloppery sound in there. But the comments section is kind of goofy because they're pointing out, like, you look like an idiot putting that thumb in front of your mouth. Why are you doing that? So then I thought, okay, my bad. And then much later, I think this was 2017, 2018, I did a recreation of the scene where Davy Jones crosses between the boats, gets on the Black Pearl, and chews Jack Sparrow out. And I recreated everything. I did all the voices myself. I recreated all the sound effects. I think I put a single piece of music in there. I added the water splashes. I just rebuilt it from scratch as practice. Listening back at that version of Davy Jones, it's not where it is now. Where the voice is now, it's the closest I've gotten. It was rougher back then. I guess that was 7 years ago now, something like that. A lot of my process with creating a voice, you can't really define it in words. It does get real particular, but kind of how it works with any voice that I take in is I have really good hearing, and I have a really good sense of how my throat, my tongue, the chambers of my mouth, I know how all that works, and I know its limitations most of the time. So I take into consideration, okay, we got a Scottish accent. We've got a bit of a curl in the back of the tongue because you gotta get the voice into a higher register. So you gotta move the back of the tongue and the bottom of the throat up a little bit, squeeze it, and then you have to roll your R's a little bit. It's kind of almost a vibe that you pick up from it. Because if you don't feel the vibe of the character, you're not gonna embody the character. So, when you want to feel a little more devious, and you want to feel more like you've got a pit of anger stuck in your gut, you start feeling the character manifest through your face. So, let me give you a few examples here, and I'll start with one of his more larger lines. So, how do you go from saying, "What fortuitous circumstance be this?" into, "What fortuitous circumstance be this?" Well, you gotta do a lot of tweaks with that. So, what fortuitous? I had to pick up on fortuitous. That's following the undulations of the Scottish accent. And you can't really, you can teach that. You can. I couldn't. This is just naturally picking it up, hearing it enough times. Oh, that's how they curl and twist the consonants and vowels and the syllables to get that sound out of it. Circumstance. 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 Gotta pick up all those little subtleties. And then I haven't figured out why Bill Nighy does this, but obviously the Tlopo developers picked up on this because I was getting coached by them in the booth, that he ends certain sentences that need stronger emphasis by leading it off with a ha at the end of it. This. And there's a throatiness to it. There's a lot of spittle back there. So then from there it goes, "Come to spend 100 years of service aboard the Dutchman, did you? Come to spend 100 years of service aboard the Dutchman, did you?" Now let me show you what it sounds like when we pull it back to his calmer register, like really calm. And we actually had to play back some scenes of him from At World's End to get this, because it's vastly different. Like all of the expressiveness is like sucked out of the voice when he's being real dead serious. 10 years I devoted to the duty you charged me. 10 years I looked after those who died at sea. And finally, when we could be together again, you weren't there. Why weren't you there? And that's at least how I do a Davy Jones impression. Keeping my voice safe when doing a voice like this. Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I've been trying to figure out what I can do, because 2025 was the most active I've been in years doing voiceover. I had a really long dry spell between like 2020 when the pandemic started. I was doing a lot of little competition voiceover stuff. There was a lot of stuff happening on Discord groups at the time, so I was putting out a lot of little things. But 2025 is the most material I've done for the most projects. So I did have to start thinking about, okay, how long can I go for these different sessions, these recording sessions? What kinds of voices should I save for later because they're gonna chew up my throat? and what voices can I do more easily and do those first. So I do have to think about that. One of the things I started doing is getting creamer, milk-based creamer, and heating that up just enough, coating my throat with that, just taking little sips, leaning back, taking little sips of it. And that lubricates things just enough to keep me going a little longer, but it's not a perfect fix. And by the next morning, yeah, I'm probably gonna have a hoarse voice by next morning. So I can't do it 2 days in a row if I'm doing a voice this demanding for this many lines. I know Andy Serkis, when he was doing Gollum on the original Lord of the Rings films, he had some weird swill. I think it was the honey lemon sort of stuff that a lot of voice actors will use, but it was a swill. It was thick, it was viscous. I want to find something like that. I want to find a go-to swill that just lubricates me up like oil and just stays there a while. There's got to be an answer to that. But I know my own limits. I know what I can handle. I'll go a little past where I think I should, and then I cut it off. Because if I don't, then I'm gonna start coughing up hairballs, and that's not a fun time. Yeah, my favorite line actually was this one right here.
Twice cursed then, and all thanks to your greed. A fitting fate. Shall I tell ye what the black spot truly signifies? It marks your debt to me.
And I think it was the devs that suggested we put a snort in there to really make it come out. And I liked that, because I can actually do that on command. It's fun. It's fun to work those into a voice because it adds weight, it adds sloppiness. If you want a character to be especially gross, put a snort in there. It really helps. 2025 is the first time that I've been back in a booth like this. And it wasn't actually this booth, it was the booth next door, slightly smaller. But being in a booth is fantastic. It really is fantastic. It feels right. You're using the best possible microphones, these Neumann U87s. The mic I have at home is an Aston Origin, so I can record at home anytime. I just kind of build the booth and tear it down anytime I need it. But absolutely recording in a real recording studio, still a big difference, mainly because of convenience. In terms of how many takes, if I'm recording myself in my own booth, I try to get the best take within 4 takes. If I really don't feel like I'm landing it, and I really want to get that exact line read on a specific word or a specific part of a sentence, I'll keep going until I get it right. But if I'm in here with a director, it's best to get it done in 3 or 4 takes, and I will trust the judgment of the director to tell me if I did a good job. And if I did, perfect. Your opinion matters more than mine because it's your project. So if you like it, then I like it. Getting into character, it'll be a little different each time. There will be certain phrases that you can latch onto that you know will put you in the right headspace and put your mouth and tongue and throat in the right space so that you recapture what you need for it. There are some anecdotes I heard on anime dubbing voice actors. There's certain actors I've heard in like commentary tracks or behind the scenes interviews from them that they had certain phrases they would latch onto every single time. Without fail, they would get back into character that way. So I try to have something similar with that, but other times it's really just reading off the lines and trying to picture in my head, how would the actual actor say that? How would the original actor have portrayed that? And I'm not gonna get that accurate 100% of the time. It really did help in this particular case with Davy Jones to have other people from the dev team who knew the character better than I did, who've really absorbed all the films and could give it back to me like, no, you gotta lean into this a bit more. You gotta add that to it. Here's kind of how I think he would say it. And so let's hear you do that this way. And it immensely helped because I take direction very well. At least I think so. I like to mold my performance to what the director or what the people in the other side of the booth are looking for. So if you want me to tweak this, that, and the other thing, I'll do every single one of them. I love doing that. I love giving people exactly what they want and maybe 20% more. I've always felt that way. Speaking of which, Tyler is a great director. I've known the guy for, I don't know what, is it 7 years, 8 years? And 2025 is the first time where I've really seen him direct people and direct me, and I think he's doing a stellar job. He knows what he's doing, and he's getting better at it. I think it comes naturally to him, so it's good to have somebody who has that natural intuition with it. All right, so I think we've covered enough here in the booth with the headphones and all that. So let's hop over to the thinking chair and answer some community questions.
Okay, so I got some questions here from the community on the Discord, I believe. And I'm actually going to start with question 4 here. How did you get hired by the Legend of Pirates Online to do VA work for them? Well, coincidence of coincidences, I wanted to bring in a little bit of an anecdote from something else that's kind of related, because this is actually not the only fan-revived Disney MMO that I've been involved with. I actually did several voiceovers for the Toontown Rewritten MMO, and that's because my sibling did graphic design for them. She did some of their promotional artworks and redesigned their logo at one point. I'm not sure if they still use it, but this was around 2011, 2012, and Joey Zielkowski called me up on an email one time, and I think it was because he was looking for a voiceover actor, and my sibling showed him my YouTube channel. Either that, or it was a further coincidence and he just stumbled on me randomly. I was doing a couple of, Disney-related voiceovers at the time on my YouTube channel. So he came to me and I did their promotional videos. I think between 2012 and 2023 was the last one I did. I've done 5 or 6 videos for them. He comes to me every couple of years. It was shocking when I eventually met Tyler. He was doing a casting call for voices for a Battlefront 2 Star Wars fan edit, like animating the character models from the game doing things, and he got sound-alike actors to play the characters, and he needed a Grand Moff Tarkin. Now, I've been doing a Grand Moff Tarkin for years, and I was really fond of that character. That's actually my favorite character to impersonate. So when I found that casting call, I hopped on it, did an audition. He took me on right away, and we've been friends ever since then. I want to say that was 2018, 2019 when that happened. And then I think in 2019 or 2020, he told me that he was doing stuff for the Legend of Pirates Online revived MMO, which I don't know how long it had been around at that point, maybe 3 or 4 years. He wanted to get me involved on Tlopo for a while. They were doing some initial animation tests to see if they could add new stuff to the game. And he wanted me to do a couple of character voices, some generic pirate sounds, I think some songs. We tried to do some sea shanties a little bit there. And then he said, hey, can you do a Davy Jones? And I said, yes. Yes, I can. I've actually done a video just the other day. That timing was there. So I did that. Didn't hear back from it for years until Tlopo was actually finally working on the Kraken update. I think I heard about that maybe last year. They were working on it. Still didn't know if and when they would need me. And then all of a sudden, I think it was June or July, Tyler said, hey, we've got some questline dialogue, and we've got some dialogue that we want to have playing over the Kraken taking down ships. So there we go. We've got it. We'll bring you in a week or two, and we'll get it all knocked out. And that's how that happened. And another thought that I had about, how do you land big roles in voice acting, or how do you land roles that are really juicy? And I gotta tell you, it's serendipity, it's luck, it is absolutely who you know, and so you have to get into a community. You have to find people who have similar interests as you, and you gotta just be good friends, be good people with each other. Because if you become somebody that someone else finds fun to be around with, they're going to want to drag you along on their adventures. They're going to want to make you part of the stuff they work on. So if you're part of a creative community, a creative network, as long as you are putting your best work forward and you're around equally minded good people, that want to make good stuff, you will find good work. Doing just straight blind auditions to random projects that you've never heard of, you don't know about them, you're diving into the open ocean, and you're gonna get some roles that way, you're gonna get some interesting stuff that way, but you still have to develop a community, because the most interesting, most wild, most fun stuff tends to come from people who already know you, who already know what good work you do, and they're gonna drag you in, they're gonna tell you, hey, I've got this awesome role for you. Might even be a role that they designed specifically because they want you to do that role. They want you to play that character. That only happens if you build a community. That only happens if you find the right people that do good work and they find their own awesome projects to work on, or ones they start themselves. They'll bring you along for the ride. You just have to take the time and put in the care to make those connections, because that's where a lot of the stuff comes from. I've just been told something that I was not told before. So apparently, when the Kraken update started with the Kraken attacking ships on a RNG, random situations, and then the Davy Jones voiceovers come in around that, whether you defeat the Kraken or your ship gets sunk, I did that voice recording separately from the other stuff. I did that way back in April of 2025. And apparently, my performance impressed them so much, I'm the reason that Davy Jones physically is in the game and has that quest line inside the cave. That's what it's all about. Doing your best work, impressing people, and they'll literally change their plans because we've got something we can work with here. What made you get into voice acting? The story I like to tell people is when I was 14 years old, I was making a short film for my 8th grade history class, and we had a Civil War section of that class where they wanted to have a big project to end the semester. So I wanted to make a film, because you could make a video, you could make an art project, you could make maybe a live presentation in class where you perform something. It was open-ended. But I made a film, and the initial version of the film was like 18 minutes, and I later expanded it to 24. And I was just kind of, going through some of the major highlights of the Civil War battles and the different forts that were taken down. And I just kind of made a montage of scenes. And I was by myself. I was performing all of these characters, I think in some cases, 5 to 7 characters in the same shot. And I had a couple of different ways that I would do that. I would use split screen some of the time. I would rotoscope myself out and paste myself back in. And that's painstaking manual work. It's amazing I could even pull that off, because I just kind of stumbled into, oh, I've got this piece of animation software and I can actually rotoscope and mask stuff into it. Like it's early After Effects, before I even knew what After Effects was. So I'm getting 5 or 6 versions of myself in the same shot, and I figured I don't have a lot of friends right now. In fact, I don't even think I had any friends at the time, so I'm acting in my own films. If I want my own films to still be good with just me, then I have to make each of these characters distinctive. I have to give each of them their own voice, their own personality. I have to inject something distinctive into each of them. So that prompted me to start doing impressions, to start picking up on different sounds and mannerisms of other characters I've heard, and to shape my voice into something different. Got to make this character sound older, got to make this character sound rougher and gruffer around the edges, got to give this guy a bit of weight, got to pitch this character up into a higher register.
Gotta give this person a bit of a drunken slur, to make him sound like it works out of the sleazy alleyways.
And then work on my southern accents, because I had to have several in that film. And it branched off from there. I started doing recitations, rereading and performing lines from films that I liked. I did several things from Pirates of the Caribbean about that same time when I was 15 and 16. I started my YouTube channel in 2007, so that's a lot of the stuff I did early on, is just reciting, performing scripts and trying to nail the performances as accurately as I could. And some of them I even redid years later. So that's what spurred me into that. What other projects have I been a voice actor for? Not many. There is one that I'm still very proud of, where I had done a recreation of the opening intro to Samurai Jack. I did Aku's monologue for that. And there was an independent rap artist. You'll find it in my playlist of voiceover work that I've done. I have Filmmaker J, that's my YouTube moniker. Filmmaker J's voiceover roles, it's in there. This independent rapper wanted to make a Samurai Jack rap song, so he called me up and asked if he could use my monologue, because it was recreated, so it's not taken from the actual show, it's just a really close sound-alike. So he incorporated that into the rap as the opening bit, and then he asked me to do some heavy cackling like Aku to put over the later end as the song transitions out. So I'm really proud of that because now I'm in a piece of music. I do love the old low-res, like low-fidelity vibe of Tlopo. I love that era of video games, like anything around Quake, Quake 3, Spyro the Dragon, Half-Life, even Doom, all those late 90s, early 2000s games that have low poly count, and they play around with stretching and squashing the character models, like Jak and Daxter. I really love that whole aesthetic, so I absolutely should play more of it, but I think I've only played a little bit going along with Tyler and his crew on there, just kind of exploring some of the early side quests. I think my favorite thing when I tried it out was being up on the walls of the fort and shooting the cannons off as pirate ships are coming into the beach. I had a lot of fun with that. So here's some more Davy Jones specific questions.
Do you know that you're only allowed to make port once every 10 years?
Yes, I did. There was a point back in the day when I think At World's End was not as well liked as Dead Man's Chest, but on Stranger Tides and the 5th film came out, I can definitely look back on the Gore Verbinski trilogy and I'm like, they're all perfect. I have zero issue with all 3 of these films. They're all perfect. It's a solid trilogy. The 3rd film delivers on so much stuff, including spectacle. I can't fault any of them for that. The 4th one has some good points. The 5th one, I saw that film on a date. Definitely not the best choice for a date, that one. Do you think Bill Nighy would be surprised with how spot on your Davy Jones voice is? Honestly, no. Because, to be perfectly honest with you, even I don't think it's perfectly spot on. And you might call me crazy for that, but there's a whole lot of things about every voice that I like to do where I think it gets 90, 92, 95% of the way there, but it's never 100. Because it can never be 100. There are some people where I'll hear their impression of characters that I like or characters that I even do, and I'm like, they're closer to 100% than I am. I will say that. But I would think if he heard it, I think he's the kind of person who would go, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool. But I don't know if he'd be surprised. Because there's all kinds of people who do really, really good character voices, and I can't be the only one. I just happen to be the guy that did it for Tlopo. And I feel really humbled and privileged to have had the chance to do that. Oh, so we do have a question here about the Pirates of the Caribbean films. So yeah, my feeling is that the Gore Verbinski trilogy is perfectly solid. Not a thing wrong with any of them. I think Dead Man's Chest is the strongest of all 5 films. I think the first film, Curse of the Black Pearl, comes second. At World's End comes third. On Stranger Tides is still 4th. I'm actually blanking on what the 5th one was called. But it's dead last because of what they did with Barbossa. I think the trajectory of Barbossa's character, it got really sloppy and really strange, and I'm like, okay, you have a daughter now, a daughter you didn't know about, a daughter who is interested in astronomy? Okay, kind of random. I mean, I'm not surprised that he sired at least one child, but it's like, was that something we needed to know about his character? It's an odd way to take the trajectory of the films and go down that path. And then I thought everybody just looked kind of sad and tired in that movie. Like, Jack Sparrow is definitely way too drunk. I think Joshua Gibbs and the other pirates that crew the Black Pearl, they're barely in it. They barely say any dialogue in that film. I think Joshua Gibbs was just kind of there as background decoration. Like, they barely use him. And it just felt so overdone. I'm not sure what you could have done to improve that film in the state that it was. I think you would have had to throw out the story, start over. We got to do something different with this. You don't have to recast anybody, at least not at that time, but you definitely could have done a better story for it. I don't know what they were thinking with that one. What would Davy Jones's comeback be when a pirate calls him Fish Face? Okay, so we've got some options here.
Fish Face. Careful, whelp. This fish bites. Aye, and you look like bait.
There's one person in the game, they call him the KrakenMan, and he's been speculating about the Kraken since like 2017. They're like, "Where they got the Kraken?" And then the devs are like, "Oh, the Kraken files from old POTCO in 2010 are like lost forever. We don't have the capability to do it." But he's like, "They're gonna add it." And then, you know, on the first day they launched the Kraken, they found him playing online, and they went and waited till he was on his ship alone, and they sunk him personally. His name is Jeremiah Deckhazzard, and he wants you to know that you made him very, very happy.
That's fabulous. Legend voice actor will tell you when they go to conventions, especially Jim Cummings and Rob Paulson, they will tell you that anybody that comes up to them, the best moments are when they tell you how much their characters meant to you and that one of their characters got them through a really tough time, made their day, made their year. Any good voice actor worth their salt loves to hear those things because that makes this job the most fun possible, is getting those reactions from the viewers, the fans, the people who care.
And for those of you who think that I'm still AI, a machine can't bargain for your soul, lad. I can.
Well, that about wraps up this Q&A session. I honestly cannot thank you all enough for how much love and enthusiasm you've shown, not just to the Tlopo dev team, but to me and my performance. Because this is the best performance I think I've ever given. Even if I give greater performances in the future, this will be a feather in my cap. Under other circumstances, there's no way this could have happened. This was serendipity, this was luck, however you want to put it. But I'm here, I did it. It is just as much fun as it seems. I hope you stick around because I've got more performances in me. I've got more interesting performances in the future. And I'll catch you next time.
Man, I just remember the time when I was in the control room next to Nick. Nick, by the way, is an amazing sound designer. Jonathan's in the booth and he's reading the lines. He's getting into character. He's like, how do you want me to say it? And I'm like, how Davy Jones says it in the movies. Very simple. And he goes, oh, okay, I got you. And Jonathan's a sweet guy. He's very professional too. And he goes from looking normal to contorts his face. And it sort of makes this like frowning face. And then you see the Dutchman's eyes come out in him. And he goes into like, what?
Fortuitous circumstance be this.
And I'm like, whoa, what is that? Is that Davy Jones in the booth or? Gosh.
Come to spend 100 years of service aboard the Dutchman, did ye? Well, there'll be the devil to pay first. Why, hello.
Love it. All right, well, let's continue with your lines here.
Your time is up. It comes now, drawn with ravenous hunger, to the man who bears the black spot.
Oh yeah, like that way you say the black spot, kind of like you almost say it of disgust. And that's pretty good. Let's do it again with that, kind of like the way you say it, but can maybe emphasize a little bit more.
Your time is up. It comes now, drawn with ravenous hunger, to the man what bears the black spot.
Yeah, I like that one. Like that one?
Yeah, I thought that was pretty good.
Let's go to the next one.
You think your cannons can save you now? You think your cannons can save you now?
What are you thinking?
I think it's,
You think your cannons can save you now?
I think it's just. I have no notes on that one.
No notes. We're all good. Let's move to the next one.
Break off pursuit. Run her light and douse canvas.
Okay, so I'm thinking we need a more sense of urgency.
Yeah.
So, break off pursuit, something like that, and run our light and douse the canvas. You know, kind of similar to the movies, but definitely with a more sense of urgency there.
Break off pursuit. Run her light and douse canvas.
Yeah, that's good.
Pretty good.
Yeah, that's great. Great job. Next one.
You can't fight what you can't see.
What if you do? How far can you go with the mocking in it? You can't fight what you can't see.
right.
So
Yeah, I
you
get it.
can't fight what you can't see.
You can't fight what you can't see.
Yeah. There you go. That's mocking. That's
Yeah.
good. That was good.
You can't fight what you can't see.
I love that. That's great. That's exactly what it's like a roller coaster, like going up and back down. That's perfect.
Jonathan, man, he takes on the character. He becomes the character. He makes every performance worth $1 million instantly.
Let no joyful voice be heard. Let no man look upon the sky in hope. Let this day be cursed by we who ready to wake the Kraken.
So if you want to hear more of my voice as Davy Jones, you can check it out in the new Kraken update of the video game The Legend of Pirates Online.
Don't let the developers know I told you this, but we intentionally, secretly released the Kraken on you. I was there the day, I forget the guy's name, I'll put up a screenshot if I can find it. This is the guy, he was out sailing and everybody, Jonathan was there too, and we were watching the screen. The captain was unbeknownst to him that he had a developer on the ship. I just remember the moment they were like, all right guys, you ready? And he's sailing, doing a map run, and they're like, oh my god, he's about to port. And they're like, oh my god, we gotta do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, and that was the first time the Kraken was released in the video game, The Legend of Pirates Online. And the first thing that happened was a question mark in the text. It was like, huh? Yeah. It was hilarious. They did not know what was going on. Everybody was freaking out, and we were laughing the entire way. Yes, it was the Doom Kraken, so they obviously didn't get a chance to fight it for real because you have to do the quest. It was an amazing experience. That moment was the best moment I've ever had working for the game because that was when magic felt real. So after Jonathan is done in the booth, he goes home and we say, thank you, Jonathan. Actually, I say, thank you, Davy Jones. I'll see you later. Now, the hard part begins. We have to take 2 hours of recorded content, smush it down to an hour maybe of usable content, and it's super important to be able to have a session that you can navigate through quickly and efficiently. That's why I brought in my amazing editor, Gabriel Taylor. I've worked with Gabriel on a lot of feature films. He's one of the fastest editors I know. He knows how to cut. He knows what I'm looking for when we work with voice talent, and he knows how to create an efficient workflow. So here's Gabriel to tell you a little bit about his workflow and process.
Hello, my name is Gabriel Taylor, and I'm a dialogue editor for film, TV, games, podcasts, and I was the dialogue editor for this project, the Kraken's Wake expansion for The Legend of Pirates Online. I got onto Legend of Pirates because of my wonderful friend and supervisor, Tyler. Brought me into this project because he knows I like games, I like dialogue editing, I like pirates. So the way I got started working on Legend of Pirates was the voice actor for Davy Jones. We recorded in studio, and then they sent me the file of just 2 hours of him talking. And so I just go through all of that, and I broke it out into like usable stuff and non-usable stuff, lines that we like, lines that didn't quite work or fell apart halfway through. And then sorted those lines based on where they're being used and what the content is and usability, so that we have just tracks for each line, each separate take being used for anything throughout the game. And so then pass it on for processing and final selection of we would have 8 lines for a single take and just take the best ones out of that, send them over to the processor and mixer, and then from there be put into the game. The first thing I would do when getting sent a file like that is strip out all of the silence, because there's a lot of dead space in between each take, and then cutting all of that out gives you a lot less content to work with, and it's easy to just see okay, this is where there is sound, so then this is this I need to look at for the project. And then from there, there's a lot of talking between the voice actor and the vocal director who's there on site with them. And so just cutting out all of that talking, so then we literally just have the content that is being recorded for use. From there, I can just look at easily this line is good, this line is not good, and cut it down even further from there. The length of the editing process for me in this kind of instance, it varies from project to project. For this one, it probably took me round about 5 to 6 hours for the about 2 hours of recorded content, which was then cut down to probably about 30 to 45 minutes of usable content. The hardest part of the job is probably going in and coming over the lines that almost sound good, but then have a little bit of something wrong with them. Maybe there's a little bit of stumble halfway through. Maybe there's a little bit of crackle from the air conditioning unit or something in the background. Just a matter of going for those little details that you might not notice just on a casual first pass through all the content, and just making sure that we have the best stuff to put forward for the next step of the process. The funnest part is, honestly, I just enjoy the silly, goofy lines. Sometimes it's just a silly moment that just makes everyone in the studio laugh. I'm not there in the studio when you guys record, but it's always fun hitting the moments that just makes everyone laugh, and the weird, silly breaks in the line, maybe they improv something off the cuff that doesn't really work, but it's funny. It's fun just being able to see that kind of side of things in a process that I didn't really get to be a part of in person. Thank you guys for listening to us talk about dialogue. I hope everyone has a good time, and I can't wait to see you on the next one.
So after Gabriel's done, he sends me the session. Now comes for the spotting session. A spotting session usually happens when you have to meet with the client. In this case, it's the developers for The Legend of Pirates Online. I want to make sure that we choose the best takes for the game. Pretty much after that, now comes the processing side for the dialogue. I do a little bit of light processing on my end. I throw it into Pro Tools. I add compression, I add EQ, I add the right amount of air. I also remove sibilances and pops in the voice, so it sounds exactly how you should expect it to sound when Davy Jones is yelling at you from underwater.
Shoot the ones that are grabbing people. Oh my god. Did you die?
So now the voice lines for Davy Jones are in the game. You're fighting the Kraken, but there's something missing. It's the sound design. So I knew I had to bring in my good friends, Sam, Cal, and Noah. I've worked with them for a long time. I've worked with them on feature films that we've done, and they each bring their own unique editing style. And I wanted to make sure that I brought them in because their touch to sound design was chef's kiss. So we broke it up into 3 different editing sections for them. Noah did the creature vocalizations for the Kraken, Cal did the debris falling when the masts break apart, and then Sam worked on the bubbles and the ocean waves. So when the tentacles rise out of the ocean, you really hear the wave come out. So let's go talk to the sound design department and see how they brought to life the sounds that you hear in the Kraken boss battle.
Hello, my name is Lukas. I'm a sound designer for The Legend of Pirates Online. Perhaps you may know my work from the new Beasts That Infest Your Waters, controlled by Davy Jones. Or perhaps you've been cursed by the dark spot. Whatever the cause may be, I hope you can slay the Kraken and find the loot that you so desire.
I got involved through a friend of mine named Tyler. Tyler reached out to me and said, hey, no, do you want to work on a video game? And my first response was, yeah, I do. So that's how I found out about this project. Yeah, when working on a game, it's never the same as working on a film or podcast or anything, because when you're making a game, nothing's linear. You work with very roughs of what something will look like. You work with the idea and you try to build out the idea as it's being made, rather than having something to go on like a visual that helps dictate how you will design and try to really immerse a player via the sound. So there's a lot of organization that has to happen, from naming conventions to understanding what you want the sound to do, how often the sound will play, take into account all those things. That way the listener and the player don't get annoyed with the sound and can just continue to enjoy the game and only have an additive experience. So the Kraken is broken down into a few different parts. I handled the vocalizations. I love creature sounds and vocalizations. I love creature voice actors. I love listening to them. That's an interesting thing. I love listening to animals and just kind of hearing how they communicate. So when I got the opportunity to make the Kraken roars, the pain sounds, the grunts, its movement, it made me really happy and excited. My teammate Cal got to work on the creature attacks. He made some awesome work, and that you'll get to hear when the Kraken comes after you. But I got to do all the creature vocalizations. I'm really happy with that. So when thinking about a Kraken roar, we have to break the idea up into a few important concepts. When playing a prototype version of the Kraken fight, it became very clear to me that the Kraken is under the water. You never see its head come above the water. So you have to understand that sound under the water moving above the water isn't something that normally happens. You generally don't hear sounds below the water. I mean, if you're below the water, I'm sure you know. I'm sure everyone's done it once where they scream or like hear, like just for like giggles to hear what they sound like underwater. But if you tried communicating from under the water by just saying something to someone who's above the water, it doesn't work. So one of the important things I had to think about before even starting was, how is this going to sound? And how does a Kraken, a creature that doesn't actually vocalize or exist, and the real world equivalent would be a squid, which doesn't make big vocalizations, how would it sound? When tackling that question, the three parts had to come into play. A Kraken is large, so it has to sound deep. It is mysterious in the sense of it doesn't exist, it's fantastical. So it needs to sound alien to our ears, but not so alien that people immediately don't grasp it. They need to have something that feels real with what they know in reality, and then go, yeah, that's the sound of the Kraken as they're attacking it. So it needs to sound right when you hear it. And the last thing is, how is the Kraken making these noises, and why is the Kraken making these noises? So if I'm just attacking the arms of the Kraken with a, like a knife, is it really going to squeal out? Or how much pain is the Kraken in, and what's that veering? Because you can go ow, and then scream out in pain and go ow, but those are two different vocalizations, and you need to make them similar. So that way, when it's a small vocalization, it sounds still right with the bigger vocalization. The death roar is something that I really liked. I needed it to sound high pitched, because when a creature is in pain, it's never deep. Or at least it's not always deep. I mean, we have dragons and other sound effects that people have made, but if you really think about how creatures react when they're hurt, it's always high-pitched in every regard. That is the number one thing to know. So when it gets hurt and it's roaring out in pain as it's dying, I need it to sound that it is at the most pain that it's ever been in, and is moving and fading away from the player. Because while the Kraken is dying, the Kraken's never gone. Davy Jones is always going to bring the Kraken back. So that's the idea for why I keep the Kraken roar high pitch, and I need it to ring out long enough to make the player feel like they've really accomplished something. So the samples that I used without any processing, I had to keep reusing because these samples need to sound right and be similar. So I did do a lot of trimming, shortening, expanding, and fading on them to that way make a variable number. I even have extra sources and samples that I used and didn't use that I turned down and turned up to keep the sound similar but never the same. So that way if you heard it roar, it would never be the same roar that occurs. That was it on the audio sample side. On the actual processing side, I went forward and backwards on a lot of delay. It's actually my favorite plugin of delay. It's just called delay. And what it does is it allows me to really fine tune the saturation and mix of how much delay I want and how long it delays and echoes. Pairing that with a nice reverb was part of what made the Kraken feel so good. And finally, I did do a lot of frequency shifting to keep the Kraken's bits and pieces that were from many different samples in the same tune with itself, and only breaking that when I feel like there should be both a symbiotic relationship between high and low end. The Kraken went through multiple phases. It started with Dehumanizer. Dehumanizer is a very popular plugin. I would say it's a bundle plugin. It's more of like an instrument where you can process a bunch of sounds through a software and control them with a what I'll call fine-tuned comb of variable nodes, each node doing something different with an audio processor. One could be, distortion, noise generation, frequency shifting. I started with that and I played around some presets that would come with the software. I then pushed it down and started to make my own set of nodes. And then I had to stop because while Dehumanizer is a great tool, it provided the groundwork of the basic idea I wanted to pull, but I would ultimately have to make that using my software and plugins outside of Dehumanizer because I want to fine tune every little detail from the reverb, the amount of distortion, put these in a set order because as you process audio, specifically in Pro Tools where it goes down in your plugins order, and your inserts where it will go the first one into the second one, into the third one, into the fourth, fifth, sixth, and so on. I want to fine tune how I want to plug in, how many I can have without the limit that Dehumanizer has, but I did start with Dehumanizer to get a very rough draft going. The hardest thing about working on Tlopo and most proudest thing that I've had to work on, I love working on games and I've loved every second of working with the Legends of Pirates Online team. The hardest thing and my most proudest moment is seeing the sheer passion that the Tlopo developers have from working on last second saber sounds. The idea of recovering some assets that, were initially in the game's files but never actually shown and bringing these things to life is something that I really loved. That being said, it's really hard for me to know what I like comparatively to what I think other people would enjoy. You can always downgrade the audio in the samples, that way it sounds like it's from older time. You can always upscale it too. In fact, it's easier to have something that's upscaled and then downscale it. So the hardest thing to me was making something that I think would match in the environment without making it too HD, because it's really easy to go extremely HD, extremely out there. But at the end of the day, this is a game. The audio design needs to remain simple. And because of that, you can't go out of the box with too much. You have to tailor the sounds to play and then immediately end. Tailor the sound to play and then immediately end without having this moment of overlap that could really muddy the experience. And ultimately, I want the players to enjoy playing the game and never think about anything else.
My name is Cal Edson. I was a sound designer for Tlopo, The Legend of Pirates Online. Got to work on some sound effects. I enjoyed my time with it, and the reception of the expansion that I worked on has been really neat to see, and I'm happy I got to be a part of it. Alright, so I will show you the assets that I worked on. I'll play little samples too. Here we have some tentacle smashes on the deck. Here are some tentacle grabbing the player. I'll do one here, one there. Here we have the tentacle pulling on the mast. And then here we have the tentacle breaking the mast. Here we have the squeeze that the tentacle does to the player. And here we have some tentacles smashing the deck. So these are the assets that I created for the expansion. I hope you all had a good time listening to my assets, even if you didn't know that I did them. I went into this project thinking about the expectation that players would have, think about the expectation that the people who assigned me the assets would have, and then my own expectation and or thoughts of how the assets would oralize, taking all those thoughts and playing with those ideas and coming up with the assets that I do. And it's very much a trial and error situation. Say you are recording or making an asset for cannon fire. Actual cannon fire might not be what you're looking for. You might manipulate some other assets that give you more of the body and the low mid energy that you're looking for, kind of in the Hollywood sound expectation that people might have, where it's this exaggerated version of what something sounds like versus what it actually sounds like. So I certainly use that principle when working on the assets that I do. And yeah, just try to make things sound like people think they should sound and also good. And from how things turned out, seems like I and the rest of the team did a great job at that. So happy to have had the opportunity and happy to have worked on it. In Reaper, I have a script that can automate randomly different aspects of a sound file, such as the volume in certain points of the sound file, the frequency emphasis on certain parts, the pitch of the sound file, and the play rate as well. And also, there's another script that I have that can do the same thing, but grab just random assets from my library. And sometimes I won't get anything that is what I'm looking for, but sometimes I'll get some. In fact, a lot of times I get something interesting and I save it and use it for later. But a lot of the time I will be using keywords and pulling from different assets that are more or less kind of what I'm looking for, and then it spits out a bunch of variations of similar sounding assets and saves a lot of time. It's also very fun to hear what the randomized process of that way of creating variations and layered sounds. Yeah. Despite the game being old, I enjoy playing it. I enjoyed the feeling of combat. I especially enjoyed the Kraken sequence and expansion that we got to work on. I think the difficulty was balanced well, and I enjoyed the level of challenge that required, even with multiple other players battling the Kraken with you. So I worked on a little bit of the Davy Jones dialogue, and also I'm going to tell you about my idea of using an envelope follower. The envelope follower is supposed to bring up the volume of the aquatic sounds whenever Davy Jones is speaking, as if his voice is resonating and moving through the water and coming out of the water itself, thus creating movement within the water. I think the individual that did this VO absolutely nailed it. He just sounds like Davy Jones. That's the work of a great voice actor, where you just hear the character. So very, very big kudos. My favorite sound effect, I would say probably the mast falling. I enjoyed the vectorization, as we call it, of the fall and then the hit. And then also the Davy Jones dialogue I enjoyed working on quite a bit, making sure that sounded ethereal but not too processed. So here are a bunch of the sound effects, and then here are the bubbles and such, and the way that they are processed. The dialogue here triggers the volume on these guys to go up, therefore sounding like the voices coming through the ocean, the waters, and the bubbles are reacting to it. I'll play a little snippet, but not sure if all of the plugins here are working, so it might not sound exactly like it should.
What fortuitous circumstance be this?
Thank you for tuning in, paying attention, listening to me. Thank you, Tyler, of course, for involving me in this project. Thank you to all the crew members that I worked with. Always enjoy working with all of you. And just another wonderful project I got to work on with Tyler and the gang. And thank you all for watching. There you go. Cal out.
Hi, my name is Sam Ostro. I'm a sound designer and sound effects editor for film and many other sound mediums. And I had worked on the sound effects for the Kraken, the Legend of Pirates online video game. I was involved in the studio. The developing team came to our sound crew, and we basically partnered with them to create a new DLC and work on the sound design for the Kraken involved in this Pirates Online video game. I work primarily on the ocean wave sound effects. I made sure to add reverb to everything, as well as some movement, just to create a consistency between tracks and between each layer, especially with the waves. And for the Liar's dice, I made sure to add different types of dice so that it sounded a little interesting and different and unique. To avoid the white noise that comes from many different tracks involved in ocean wave sound effects, I had to make sure to equalize and cut certain frequencies in the lows and the highs just between each track, so that if there was a big wave that had a lot of dynamics and then a small wave that had small dynamics, I could expand the dynamics of a small wave so that the tail end of a big wave could have an extension that makes it sound as if it's fading away naturally. For the debris hitting the water, all I really started with was the water splashing in general against rocks, and then the destruction is just crash and debris from junkyard and like crushing impacts and like big planks falling, and I just layered each of those things together and timed everything kind of randomly enough so that it sounded like there was an impact and with a bunch of broken debris splashing into the water. I have not necessarily worked on game audio much before, so it was a little intimidating to start working with a developing team all of a sudden to work on these sound effects, because I'm not an implementer, so I'm a sound designer, and having to be involved in something that a lot of people are going to be playing online, especially on PC, since PC is especially popular nowadays, felt very welcoming. And I felt the challenge and I wanted to kind of see how things could go. So when I met the developing team, they were very nice. They pulled our team in, explained the entire process and what the DLC was going to entail. And then as we started playing the game with the dev team, and that kind of opened up new avenues because we never had actually been so involved in the background. The first time they introduced the Kraken to us, it was very interesting because there wasn't much sound involved at the moment of seeing it for the first time and playing it in the game. So all we were really seeing was what we were seeing, and not being able to hear all of the sound effects that we were potentially going to create for this developing team. It was interesting to have to use my imagination to help develop the most realistic experience that you can have in a video game that doesn't look realistic. But the fact that we're using and utilizing real-world sound effects definitely immerses you in the sound environment as well as the in-game world that you're walking around and battling this Kraken in. I definitely thought it was interesting. I could tell that there were a lot of quirks to tweak up. Like early on, it seemed as if it was going to be a long project, but then all of a sudden, when we were finished designing our sound effects, they finished implementing. So we all got back onto the server to listen to what we had done, and that was definitely quite a gift, because for the first time, I could actually hear my own designed sound effects in a video game. My favorite sound effect that I had worked on was most likely the the debris hitting the water whenever the Kraken came up and went down. Sometimes you would hear an impact with the water fading away. So that was really cool. I think what was really cool about layering all these debris crashes and water together was that I had to completely separate both elements, the ocean wave as well as a plank hitting the water or crashing down. It definitely immerses you more into the process because you're having to layer opposite elements together to create a full cohesive sound effect that will be used within an entire gaming world. I think the hardest sound effect that I had worked on for this video game was most likely the heavy waves, because there's a lot of equalization, filtering, and I need to add reverb to the waves as well, because when you're in an open environment in the middle of the sea, reverb's kind of random and everywhere, so everything had to have its own specific reverb. So there was a small reverb and then there was a big reverb for specific sound effects. It's been a blessing to work on such a fun game for many people to enjoy. I hope to see this game continue to update, and I hope to see everybody get online. Thank you so much for listening.
So as you can tell, there was so much love that was poured into this update. Jonathan, who did an amazing performance as our Davy Jones. Gabriel, who did an amazing job dialogue editing, making sure we worked as efficiently as we could. The sound design team coming in clutch and really making us feel every tentacle, every impact that we felt when we were battling the Kraken. Now, it's my turn to tell you about my experience, my workflow, and my process for approaching the music for the Kraken's Wake expansion. And it all starts with what happens when you hit a reef. Or in my case, when I got fired from The Legend of Pirates Online. Yes, I got fired from Tlopo. So let's talk about it. So when I was a kid, I slowly started getting into music composition, and one of the first songs that I played back on the piano when I was really young was Oh Susanna. And the second song that I played back by ear was He's a Pirate from Pirates of the Caribbean. As a kid, I played that back on the piano. I remember I was in my dad's apartment and I was playing on the keyboard. We were watching Curse of the Black Pearl and the end credits came on. I went to my dad's keyboard and I wanted to see if I could play it back. And so I played the credits back and I played it on the keyboard, and sure enough, I got pretty close and I was like, Dad, look, I did it. I'm Hans Zimmer. And he's like, great job, son. So that was when I started getting into Zimmer's music when I was a kid. And I remember in middle school, I would play his music back on the computer time that we always had. I would sneak on YouTube and I would look up Hans Zimmer orchestral score, Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And I would just jam out while the teacher's like blabbering. That kickstarted my dream to become a film composer. So in high school, I was writing music on the iPad. It was like an old app. It wasn't GarageBand. It was actually Music Studio. I was crazy as a kid. I paid like $100 on the iPad to have like some access to some higher quality VSTs. And I remember I was layering music that way. And I went to my mentor, my film teacher, and I was like, hey, how do I, do what Hans Zimmer did? And he's like, why don't you just be a film composer? I'm like, so I can be like him? And he's like, yeah, just start writing music to films. And I'm like, how do I do that? And he's like, well, you gotta learn the program. So long story short, I remember playing the original Pirates of the Caribbean online game when I was a kid. Of course, I remember it closing down and I was very sad. And then somewhere along my high school days, I remember when I was on the iPad doing some music, trying to find projects like my film teacher said I should look for, I found developers that were recreating Pirates Online. And I was like, that's so cool. And I reached out to them. I'm like, hey, can I do some music for you? And they're like, sure, yeah, send us some music. I wrote some cues for them and that was really cool. That was fun. They were like, yeah, sounds good. Back then I wasn't as good, just so you know. Yeah, I sent them some music. I graduated high school and I got fired because I went inactive. I was trying to figure out my life as a composer and I wanted to go to Berklee and I was never classically trained. I auditioned for Berklee and that didn't go too well. To tell you a little bit about that, they were looking for very classically trained composers where I guess I wasn't. I fitted outside the wheel of what they were typically looking for. But what I did have by then was very specific interest in MIDI mockups. Now, for people who are not composers and listening to me talk about this jargon, right? MIDI mockups are basically orchestral VST. OSTs. They are orchestral samples. They are meant to be used when you're writing the music for an orchestral track. So, of course, again, being a Zimmer kid since I was young, I had gotten pretty good by then with my limited experience writing music for Tlopo and a couple other projects here and there. I actually did my first film score when I was in high school. I had a little bit of credit under my belt. When I auditioned for Berkeley, they sat me down in front of a piano, and I didn't do too really well. Again, I wasn't classically trained when they were asking me a lot of classical questions, but what I did have was a very specific set of skills in MIDI mockups. And I went to that portion of the interview and they were like, dude, this is amazing. I was like, yeah, I've been working on this for you. I actually made them an original orchestral track back then. And they were like, yeah, I don't see why not. I don't see why you can't get in. And then I didn't get in and I saw my life collapse in front of me. I'm like, how am I going to be a film composer? How am I going to do this? And sure enough, one day I figure out that I should go to the Savannah College of Art and Design, or SCAD. And I learned the sound design program, but I went in there with the MO of being the #1 film composer. I wanted to be the film composer. And I did. I did a lot of work for the Coca-Cola company. I made some amazing contacts with some executives over there. I did a lot of film scores when I was at SCAD. Of course, one of the coolest things that I was able to do was the music for Tlopo. So it was 2019 and I was in my freshman year of college and I saw that the Tlopo game was still running. I was like, oh man, I should get back with Tlopo. So I reached out to one of the devs. I'm like, hey, I'm back. Do you remember me? I would love to write some music for you. That dev was like, pretty sure we fired you. I'm like, what? I know I went away, and they're like, yeah, I'm sorry. We don't rehire either. I'm like, what? So I begged them to let me write them one more piece of music. I was like, dude, let me just write you one piece of music. Let me show you what I got. And I promise you will be pleased. I promise. So don't let the devs tell you I told you this. I'm telling you a lot of secrets I shouldn't be telling you right now. But I wrote a original, awesome Spanish-inspired acoustic guitar battle track for this unreleased cave that, as far as I know, it's still unreleased. And it was like flamingo style epic orchestral track. They loved it. They were like, oh my God, that's amazing. So am I in? And they're like, come back here. What are you doing out there? I was like, thanks for letting me in. So anyways, since then I've been writing music. I wrote the music for the Capture the Chest update. I wrote some trailer music. I also wrote sea shanty music, as some of you may know. You know, nothing as big as the Kraken's Wake expansion. When the devs reached out to me earlier this year to really go ham with the music for Kraken's Wake, I really wanted to make sure I did that. Not only because I love working with the developers on this game, but because of my love for the Hans Zimmer Dead Man's Chest score. And I knew that this was my moment to be able to show everyone what I can do. One day, I was able to see Hans Zimmer live, and that was the best experience I've ever had. I mean, I'm sure a lot of other composers and audience members feel the same way. And I'll really quickly tell you, I wasn't originally supposed to go. The tickets were really expensive. And then the day he came to Duluth, Georgia, I had a friend call me and he's like, hey Tyler, are you gonna go see Hans Zimmer live in Duluth? I'm like, no, it was too expensive. He's like, all right, well, I'll let you know how it goes. And I was like, okay. And I was like, you know, I'll go look and see what the prices are. And sure enough, I looked and it was like $99 a person. I looked at my wife and I was like, we gotta go. I remember sitting in the arena and the moment when Zimmer stepped out on stage, it was electrifying. The moment when he played the Pirates of the Caribbean music, the world just sort of closed in on me. It felt like serendipity. It felt like magic. He was leading the stage and it was so awesome. It was the best time of my life. I got this hat. I very much look up to Zimmer. So all this to say that Hans, if you're listening to this, you'll probably never see this video. But if you are listening, hire me. No, just kidding. The music that I did for the Kraken's Wake, this is my love letter to Hans Zimmer. That is my story. That's how I became a composer, studying the greats, and where I am today, sitting in this chair, is only because of the support of my family, friends, and you have given me. So I want to say thank you. So now that my story is out of the way, let's talk about how I approach the music for the Kraken's battle sequence. So the mechanics of how the audio operates in Tlopo is a little archaic. It's not like modern day video games that you have advanced processing and advanced tools to be able to use, like audio kinetic wise, to be able to really do a dynamic score. When I first started doing the music for this update, I really wanted to push the boundaries of what can be done in this video game. The telltale of that was trying to create more dynamic music for the boss battle. That was when I drew on my previous experience working on a another video game called In the Black. It's a sci-fi shooter game. In that game, the music is a little more traditional in the sense of modern day video game scores, where you write a piece of music and the stems can be played at any point in time to give it more of a dynamic feel. It does a little more advanced switching between different cues, yada yada. So with Panda 3D, we didn't have much of that. So I sat down with the devs and I drew out a very basic outline of how I wanted the music to be dynamic in this boss battle. And there's 3 different phases. So phase 1 is when you hit a reef and the Kraken pins your ship and you can't go anywhere. And the tentacles rise out of the water and you start attacking the Kraken for the first time. So it goes intro music, phase 1. The intro music will rise up and then the phase 1 music plays throughout and it loops, just like that. The way I did it was created about, I think it was like 20 or 30 seconds, maybe less, maybe about 20 seconds of intro. And then this right here is supposed to be about a minute and a half of loopable music. We labeled it in different sections like A, B, C, D. So you can toggle actually, it's not just one track that plays, even though it is, we scheduled it out. So it'd be like section A plays, then section B, and then section C, D, and E. And so we broke it up into those different parts so that you can loop back wherever you needed to. When you get down to E, you can loop back to B if you need to. And then when you get to E, you can loop down to C. I was very specific and you'll see when I show you in the DAW what I mean, right? It's a very simple design to be able to accommodate an older video game engine that we run on Tlopo. Now let's go into the second phase, which is the fight between you and the Dutchman's crew. When the Dutchman's crew boards your ship, I just knew that we had to do something really intense, like something awesome and epic. When I was writing it, I included the voice of Jonathan, actually. So Jonathan's voice is what you hear in that cue. You'll listen to it when I play it for you later. When we were in the booth recording Jonathan, I was like, can you do a Bootstrap Bill impression? And he was like, you got 3 days, Jack. You know, or whatever, you know, Bill Skarsgård says in Dead Man's Chest. I was like, that's pretty good. Can you say some more lines? And he was like, part of the ship, part of the crew. I was like, yeah. I don't know if we can get that in the game, but yeah. And so turns out when I was making the music, again, I'll show you later, but when I was making the music, I was like, this track needs something. Since it was rhythmic enough, I slid in part of the ship, part of the crew, part of the ship, part of the crew, and that repeats, and it's like a chant. I played it with the melody that I did for Davy Jones in that backing track, right? If you guys are familiar with the lyrical version of the Davy Jones theme that's somewhere on YouTube, I think the lyrics are cruel and cold, something, something, right? I took that as inspiration because when you're looking at the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, there was never a lyrical element to that song. The YouTube version is really cool. I wanted to do our own spin with Tlopo. So I was like, what can I do and what have I done before that would fit this moment, that's epic and intense, but like would have a lyrical element to the song since I'm doing the Davy Jones melody. And then it clicked. I've done sea shanties before. That's what I feel like the part of the ship, part of the crew in my canon mind of what Pirates of the Caribbean is. That's why they say that chant, because in theory, maybe Davy Jones is, you know, he's sliming away on his organ, right? And he's playing the melody, and maybe the crew is like brushing the deck and they're chanting part of the ship, part of the crew. When I was putting this song together, that's what I felt like needed to happen. And I was like, God, yes, we need to do that. So that was phase 2. Just a very simple, cut and dry, A to B track that loops back to back, right? And then phase 3. Phase 3 is when you fight the Kraken tentacles for the second time. They come back with a vengeance. And there were actually 2 parts to phase 3, believe it or not, because I wanted phase 3 to be 2 minutes long. I broke it up, I believe, I can't remember the estimate, but it was like half that, right? So for phase 3, I broke it into 2 halves. The first half was leading up to the epic part of the music. It's very intense and it gets your attention, right? The second half is all out craziness, and I'm doing the craziest rendition of the Davy Jones theme, and I was just like, we got to do that. So that's how this one works. Is for the part of phase 3, you play the first track and then it moves to the next part, and it can toggle back and forth based on however long that fight sequence is. So it can go forever and ever, and the music will always be dynamic. It won't be just the same loop over and over and over, and that's the way we made the music dynamic. I did want to mention that obviously we have the death track and the victory track right here. In total, this is about 6 minutes of music that I wrote, roughly. Maybe 7 minutes if you include the trailer music that I wrote. This was my outline. This was my Bible. When I sat down, when I pulled out my keyboard and started writing the music, this was in front of me the entire time, just like this. And I was like, okay, intro music, playing the intro music. And then I was like, okay, now we're at the crew fight on the keyboard here. And I'm just trying to figure it out. And it was a grind, man. Let me tell you, it was the most fun I've ever had. I was working from 12 at night until 6 a.m. the next morning, 8 a.m. the next morning, then going back to work at like 10 a.m. It was like nuts. There was a lot of labor of love in this. Blood, sweat, and tears all the way, for sure. All right, so you've gotten to know me a little bit better, I would say. Let's go ahead and have some fun. Let's listen to some music that I wrote. I'm so thrilled for this next part. This is the part I've been looking forward to. Let's go ahead and I'll show you in-depth workflow of how I approached each cue and some of my favorite things that I did when writing the music. So, all right, let's listen to some music, shall we? Let's get into it. Alrighty, so this is my Cubase template for phase 1. As you can see, I follow the typical structure for orchestral composing. Brass strings, right? So these are all my brass. This is my strings. These are my percussions right here. These are my miscellaneous instruments. These are choir. These are my big cinematic drums. Now, I do break convention here a little bit since I imported these later on after I created my template, and I imported these percussion tracks from another project. So yeah, it's got a real nice boom to it. I'll show you guys a little more in depth what I did there. These are my guitars. This is my basses. We got the organs, of course, and we got a little cool ethnic wind down here. Yeah. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll play phase 1 here. So that way you guys know what it sounds like as I start kind of walking you through my process. And really quick side note is that this is an unmixed session. I like to mix in Pro Tools. So what I do is after I'm done speed writing, I go ahead and I export all the stems and then I dial in the mix a little better in Pro Tools to make sure we're not clipping. And as long as I'm not clipping on any single one of these tracks, especially when I have to work quickly, then I know that I can fix it later on. So what I'll go ahead and do is I will try and show you the relevant MIDI that is playing through each of the sections. So that way you guys have a show when you're following along with the track as it plays. Here we go. So as you can see, I did a lot. I think the first thing I want to start with is the Tino Cello. So the Tino Cello you can do a lot of cool things with. You can do some crazy sounds. I saw her live in Hans Zimmer. She was great. Her library has a lot of awesome sounds. And so this is the sound that I came up with. So when you play it all together, it kind of sets the moment, right? My strings, I'm using orchestral tools. They have a lot of awesome sounds. I chose to lead with the sort of Pirates of the Caribbean sound, which is like this sustained, tense moment of the strings. So those are more dramatic. These strings right here are a little less dramatic. I'll play from here. Right, so they kind of build up, and the brass are also building up here. Just using sustains. For the percussion, so this part is definitely something worth looking at real quick. My percussion, I layered a couple different things. So I have 3 different snares. I have this snare, and I have this snare. So when you combine all those snares together, you get a really nice punchy sound. I know it sounds low, but it adds up, right? If I just have one, it's like, where's the extra little oomph at? So all 3 of those are layered up. Then I'm using something called LA Perk. Has a lot of awesome samples with it. This is the bass drum. Right? And then I've got some gongs. I've got some cymbals that I'm using. Everything's just going to come in from the right. So my toms there. And I've got some epic SFX like this flam close sound. And I layered it with just a couple other packs they've got. Blood Ensemble. So when you put all those together, you get this like huge sound. Love it. Yeah. And I do that a couple times. I do that over here too. And then I keep a rhythm here. So that percussion is actually matching up, which is super important, with this percussion. Percussion is like the most, if not the most important part of the puzzle in any action piece done in the Pirates of the Caribbean films. It's the glue, right? Let's take a listen to what this track would sound like if we didn't have the percussion, right? Because you know what's coming next. You know, we go into the whole little, this part here. So real quick, I'm gonna play it, nothing muted. And then this is what it sounds like with no percussion. You hear that? It's night and day. So you get the point, I think. The percussion is the glue. The percussion holds everything together. Specifically this patch right here. Dun, 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 dun. Right? And then you patch it up with the little brass here. And you want to emphasize certain moments. So the brass is going dun, dun, dun. And the best way Zimmer does that is with these crashes here. And I find other ways to emphasize that, i.e., these little hits right here. You hear how I'm emphasizing the dot, dot, dot. So with that emphasized, right, you've got a cohesive glue, and then we start filling in the lead instruments, which is the brass and the guitar and bass that help the brass, because the brass sounds sort of like a little by itself, but when you add that in with the brass, it sounds fuller. But we want the brass to stay on top of it, right? Because it's orchestral, it's pirates. Now with everything together. By the way, side note, I skipped it, but this little part over here, the little SFX here, the little flutter, I put that in specifically because I was trying to time it when he goes, it's the Kraken. In most cases, when the game isn't lagging, it does fit very well. Okay, well, next part, strings. So I haven't talked about the strings too much. So the strings start coming in towards the latter half of that previous part. I'll solo them. These are my favorite strings. It is from Adventure Strings with a mix of performance samples. His classical shorts, they sound great. So those just sound punchy and they cut through, which is important because you can't have strings that sound wet and in the far back. Otherwise, it'll get drowned out with the brass and the percussion that's going on. Because I've got French horns, I've got trumpets going on. That's also important. The trumpets are super important. I specifically programmed them to be super quick. Sorry, I know I'm jumping lanes here, but... You'll notice that the brass isn't going that fast, right? So if I go together with the brass, you'll see that the brass is like da 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 da, but the trumpets are like da 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 da. So that's done purposely so that way you're paying attention more to this little rise up that I'm doing, right? So this is like our filler, right? This section right here, I wanted it to be something that could fill the gaps between this melodic idea that I got and this melodic idea that I got over here, which you'll hear in a second. So it's very simple. It's a very simple, just little... And Zimmer does that a lot. And I just layered so we get this sound. Now we're going into the next part, which is one of my favorites. It needs to sound bassy. We've done so much so far except bring in the bass. And this is where I was like, we got to do it. So I focused on this variation of the Kraken melody, and I wanted the bass guitars to lead off. My MIDI for bass guitar is sort of limited. I'm using the East-West bass guitars, right? So I did the best I could, and I found a way to make it so you don't really think twice about those bass guitars. I paired it with some really epic low strings. Like, listen to those strings. I love this by Performance Samples. Like, You could definitely do some like Sherlock Holmes. Sorry, I just had to do that. So here's what it sounds like. Not all of it will come through since it doesn't register that low part, but you can't really tell because I've got so many other things layered. I've got the Simbasi, which is another super low instrument playing, which really masks like everything. Like where the bass guitars fall short, the brass kind of comes underneath and punches through, right? And of course, the percussion helps as well. So for the percussion part, I really wanted it to sound like the Davy Jones crew was like hitting some hammers, like, you know, like, I don't know, like they're working on the ship, they're repairing the ship or whatever. I really wanted it to sound kind of ragged and like machine-like. So that's definitely why I put the anvils in there. And all everything together. So this part, I really wanted it to be like turning up the heat. And the best way I could do that was finding some really cool samples like from these guitars here. I love the screech. Also from East West. I really wanted to turn up the heat, so these guitars samples I put in also kind of like simulate like we're moving up, we're taking it up a notch. Kind of just layered in there. And of course we've got the lead guitar there. I love the way that sounds, especially with like everything else with the bass. That's just the extra guitars there are supposed to sort of help with make it sound fuller. And then we got the choir. We'll come back to the choir in just a minute. I want to show you guys. So yeah, we've got this section right here. It sort of just repeats itself, you know, just like this low end driving part for section E. So we've got the choir here, taking inspiration from what Zimmer does in his Pirates of the Caribbean scores. Oceana. And the choir comes in sort of full force. Of course, it's the Davy Jones theme, and we mirror that with the brass up here. And then we end it with the filler. So that way, you can place the filler and you can cycle between B and then go back to the filler And then you can come back to, let's say, D. And mind you, each time you cycle back, it plays through. So it's like, here's the prep, go to B, plays through. The prep is already there. So then you can cycle to D, plays through, goes back to B, plays through, goes to D, plays through. So it's a never ending loop, right? And that was intentional. So that is how I built phase 1 of the score. I hope that was fun, and honestly, I'm glad that you guys stuck with me through this walkthrough. Now, quick heads up, I originally had phase 1, 2, and 3 all together in this one monster video, but it was pushing like an extra hour, so I did split it up. If you want to keep going, phase 2 and phase 3 are already up on my personal YouTube channel, Tyler Grow Music. Phase 2 is the part of the ship, part of the crew vocals that we recorded with Jonathan. I take you through and show you how I layered his vocals with the choir to make it sound even bigger. You guys are not going to want to miss out on that. And then phase 3 is the You've Only Made Her Angry and No Quarter tracks. That's the part where the fight really ramps up and the tentacles come back after you take on the Davy Jones crew in the game. So I'll put everything in the description and you guys can find them on my YouTube channel. Appreciate you guys a ton, and I'll see you over there. Alrighty, so once I'm done writing the music, the next thing I need to do is send it to my amazing engineer, Byron Childs. Byron is a beast. Byron has his own Atmos home studio. He's been working as an engineer for a long time. We met at SCAD and we have a great friendship. He's also an audiophile. He will tell you the best speakers that you could ever want to know about. He could tell you about the best headphones he uses. He actually got me to buy these, which are the Steven Slate VSX headphones, and I use them all the time when I'm mixing my own music, when I don't have the pleasure of working with other engineers. So when I typically write music for Tlopo, I mix the music, but for this update, I wanted it to be really good, like music straight out of the films, right? Like I wanted it to sound like a blockbuster, like you're fighting against the Kraken. It's got a rock sound to it, like Zimmer was doing in the Dead Man's Chest score that I referenced very heavily, and I needed an engineer. As a composer, you only sound as good as your engineer will let you, if that makes sense. Like I can sit here all day long and just write the best music, but if you don't have a great engineer by your side, you're really not going to sound the best that you could, to be quite honest. The awesome thing about working with Byron is that he comes in with a different perspective. He also loves Zimmer. You'll hear how his process is and how he referenced the score from Dead Man's Chest, and how Zimmer also uses a lot of bass, and I did too as well in the music, but Byron really was able to dial in the Zimmer sound. And fun fact, Hans Zimmer's best engineer was Alan Meyerson. If you follow Alan Meyerson, Alan is one of Zimmer's go-to score engineers when he's doing some major blockbuster score, right? So anyways, I wanted to copy that formula. These major blockbuster films are having an amazing composer, an amazing engineer working together. For this epic update for Kraken's Wake, I wanted to make sure that we copied that setup. And sure enough, it succeeded more than I ever could have thought. We were working really fast. We were working against the clock, and Byron and I kind of came up with this system where I would write the music, I would send it out to him. I would actually prep a Pro Tools session first, and then I would send it out to him, and he would mix these amazing sessions, and then I would go back to the next track and start writing, and then the process repeats over and over and over. That's how we were able to cover some ground really quickly and effectively, and Byron has just an amazing workflow. So for you music producers that are listening into this, you're going to want to pay attention, because Byron has a lot of information. He has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. I'm still learning things from Byron, and this guy is just keeping up to date with the best plugins for mixing music, and he really did go all out. I think he even bought some plugins to like mix the music. So he's invested money into this. I know I have. I can't wait for you to meet Byron. He's such a great guy. So let's go ahead and talk to Byron and hear how he handled his process for mixing the music in this update.
Hi, my name is Byron Childs. I am a sound designer, engineer, and occasionally I do also do some filmmaking on the side. Oh yeah, also I wanted to add that I'm also a graduate of SCAD. I'm a SCAD alumni. I've been doing sound design before I went to SCAD. I've been doing sound design for all my life, mostly. I started doing sound design with music. I'm a musician as well. I started making music and doing things with my bass guitar. That was sound design, and I didn't even know it. Adding sound design elements to that, and getting into theater in high school, and then finding out more about sound design from an engineering standpoint in a studio when I went to SCAD for graduate school. This project is a Pirates online video game. I've had the pleasure of mixing the music for Tyler. He's asked me to engineer and to mix and master his score for the video game. I've been helping with that. I'm really happy to be a part of it. I've learned so much, and honestly, I look forward to doing other projects. I grew up listening to Hans Zimmer. I've always been a fan of his, and I was about 10 feet from meeting him a few years ago when I saw him on stage, but he walked right past me. He didn't know me. But hopefully one day he might know me one day. So we'll see. I'll keep praying. Well, I guess before I go into all the details about my process, I can also touch on a little bit on what the differences between a sound designer and an engineer is. And I'm sure you may or may not know what a composer is, but I'll say that for Tyler. I've actually worn all three hats, even though Tyler is a better composer than I am. We've actually shared some really great ideas from each other because of the engineering. As a sound designer, sound design is so broad. You're thinking about the music, you're thinking about that stuff, but it's a difference. You're more so thinking about how does this plane sound? Really, you're creating the world. The world does not exist that you're creating for. 100% of the sound that we see in a film, a video game, animation film, it's all been redone. A sound designer basically places the sound in there that the audience sometimes can see and sometimes can't see off screen or on screen. As a sound designer, you're responsible for placing those sounds in there to create this world, because the eyes, they allow us to see what's going on in the world, but the ears allow us to experience it. Sound is such a big part of our experience as a human. Part of that, when you put all those sounds in there, now you need it to sound good. And that's where the engineer comes in. That's what I did for this project. Although I just did it for the music, it basically is the process of me taking those sounds, making sure that everything is leveled, making sure that what needs to be heard is heard at the right moment for whatever is going on in the scene. Because at the end of the day, it's about the story, it's about the characters, it's about what needs to be heard for the audience to understand what is happening in that environment at that very time. And then I know Tyler, he's probably going to talk about it later, but I can touch on a little bit about the composer. The composer kind of bridges the gap between sound design and music, because you can add elements of sound design to music scoring to give the audience a feeling of what is happening in the scene. And so all those elements are very important to helping us not only visually understand what's going on, but also feel it to help the audience feel what is going on in the scene. So I hope that clears up a little bit about what I do and, all the various parts of sound design. Yeah, so Tyler talked to me about the project, and I have always been a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean. And so, just coming from watching the movie and kind of understanding that world and how it could sound with all of the other elements with the music, I kind of used my memory to kind of reference some of the scenes. And also, being a fan of Hans Zimmer, I've always listened to Pirates of the Caribbean, but I was able to reference some of his music to kind of give me an idea of what it should sound like, because that was one of the things that I really wanted to encapsulate in the mix was, Hans Zimmer, his music is very nice and open and warm, but also the bass. And I think we both like bass, but the bass is so clean and it feels like a live, I guess, kind of a rock band kind of a feel. And so I kind of wanted to encapsulate that in the music. I did see the video game, prior to this, as far as like being able to reference it. I saw a few pictures. I mostly took my reference from the movie. Going into the process of mixing the score, Tyler, he sends it to me off of a server, and I gather the assets of all the different sounds and all of the different stems. You have the brass section, you have the percussion section, the string section, and then you have a few miscellaneous sections as well, and bass guitar, organ. Those things are sent to me as a session file, and I pull it up on my end into Pro Tools, which is what I use. It's my dog choice, but he sends me the files and I pull it up, and the first thing I do is I listen to it. And as I'm listening, which he already pretty much does a pre-leveling or a pre-mix to kind of get it in the ballpark of where he feels he kind of wants everything to sit. And I just kind of take what he's done and I evaluate. I make my own notes. I say in this section, okay, the horns are a little loud, let me bring those down. Sometimes I make those notes and I come back to it. Sometimes I just do it, and that seems to help me a lot, because sometimes you have so many notes. Typically I'll run through it and I'll start making changes to it right away. But sometimes I do listen to it just to kind of give it an overall run through. I listen to it, and I've learned so much listening to his premixes and things. I used to, when I first started mixing, I would put plugins on everything, which a plugin, basically a piece of software that you place on a track to basically be able to process the sound. I used to put EQ, which EQ is great, but it's disruptive. And being that it's disruptive, you can actually damage things. And I've learned that it's not really about every single element, EQing every single thing. It's about taking each section and making sure it sounds good between all the different groups, such as the string section and against the brass. Like this one track, I think it's phase 3. There wasn't as many vocals, but I would say that the melody, I try to look at the melody section. Whatever it needs to come out, I make sure that is heard. And of course the bass, whatever is supporting the bass, that's the foundation. I try to tackle that. Bass it eats up the headroom of a mix, and it can cause distortion if you don't level it off. So I try to get all of the bass for all the different parts handled so that it's not muddy, because then you can't hear the melody properly. So I try to make sure that those are leveled first, and then I go to all the other various parts. Well, Pirates of the Caribbean, even looking at the live performances of Hans Zimmer, the guitars and the organ, which I always seem to come to the organ last because it holds the foundation of some of the songs, but then it holds some of the melody. So I kind of come to it last because it's kind of like the secret sauce on top. The organ is kind of like that thing that I would say that, Pirates of the Caribbean is known for. Hans Zimmer, he loves the organ, and the organ's a big part of that. But I think the section that I kind of went to is the percussion section. The percussion section is very dense, typically, especially with the snares. I like the fact that Tyler puts a lot of different snares, because that helps to provide punch and everything. Because some snares have different sounds. You have your top end snares, then you have your lower register snares. And so I try to get those tamed, because between the snares and the cymbals, because the cymbals can be harsh sounding sometimes, and if you want them to sustain and sound good, I typically don't add compression as much, but I do EQ them to kind of tame the highs. So I go to those sections first, and also the brass section. The brass section can also be a very harsh section, so I have to make sure that, and part of Tyler's style, along with Hans Zimmer style, especially for Pirates of the Caribbean, is those lower, I would say, bassier sections. So then you have the tuba and things like that. So that stuff needs to be tamed, and it needs to be processed to get the harshness out. So I do look at those sections, but typically I'll start with leveling, and then if there needs to be EQ, I'll EQ those as well. And I typically use FabFilter. I love FabFilter. I love all their plugins. I use FabFilter plugins for just about everything. I have come to find them as a really great utility plugin for EQ, compression, limiting, all that. But I also like to stay in the box, because if I ever needed to move the session to a place that doesn't have those things, which FabFilter is very popular now, I also use Pro Tools. I use their plugins, so I can kind of stay in that system so I can be more flexible. I think the easiest mix that I've had to do for this project would probably be the trailer, because that was the last thing that we did. And I think that as I worked on the different tracks, I developed a sound that I knew that would sound good, but also I love mixing trailer music, and I like creating trailer music too, but I especially like to mix trailer music. It's different than mixing for film or just the regular parts of the music, because I know I like trailers. I don't watch trailers, but I like them. And growing up, I always wanted to be that guy that, in the beginning, I wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be the trailer guy, but they don't do that anymore. It sucks. But I love trailer music, and I feel like that was probably the easiest, especially with, there were parts that made it easier. Like, this was the first track that Tyler was able to actually get a bass player to come in and play, and it made mixing bass so nice. It was so full sounding, and it was just something, because I play bass guitar, and it's just something about hearing somebody play bass is so cool, and I really enjoyed that. And I also love the choirs, and he had already done some work. It was sounding good, it just needed some love, and I feel like I was able to kind of do that because I just love trailer music. So yeah, that was my favorite part. Ooh. Well, I think that the first one gave me the most trouble because, when you're starting a project like this, there's so many parts, and Tyler's working under the gun. I'm working, trying to get this stuff done. And I think that, you're trying to figure out a process, and I didn't have a process. This is actually the first project that we've done musically together. I've done engineering with him and the team, doing sound design work for like Star Wars animation fan films and stuff like that, but I never had the opportunity to do score. And so trying to figure out that and trying to figure out how to make things sound close to what Hans Zimmer did, that was tough. I don't have a multi-million-dollar studio to work in like him. Both of us don't. So trying to emulate that, but also trying to just make it sound as good as I possibly can. Trying not to get in my head, because sometimes you can get in your head with this, especially mixing. I would take years to mix one track, but I learned over the years that, to mix fast and to mix as simple as possible. And I think it got more simple as the projects went on, but I think the first one, it was a little challenging. Honestly, it's between the first and the second phase of that project, as I had to do things to kind of process things correctly. Okay, yeah, so Tyler asked me about phase 2, which has a lot of different vocal parts. Yeah, let's talk about, I think, one of the most interesting sections or parts of the score for the video game, which was phase 2, which actually I was told by Tyler it was the first one, and he reminded me that it was the first track that we use a choir, well, I would say vocals. And I thought it sounded really, really good. That was interesting. So coming from the film world where, dialogue is king, I did some things with that I really liked. And I'm looking over the session now, and it's very interesting that I did not use the reverb that I typically use. I used the reverb from Dear VR, or Dear Reality, which was called Exoverb. I used that just to kind of he had already placed some reverb there, but I also wanted to kind of add a more, I guess you could say, more of a hall reverb to it, and we should give it a little bit more space. It will also kind of separate it from the violin section, because there's a lot of violins, a lot of strings in this song, and I just wanted to give it a little separation from that. Also, I would say the organ. So I wanted it to kind of go to the sides a little more, and the reverb kind of did that for me. I also had to add some compression to kind of tame some of the dynamics of it, because some of the tracks had different, I guess you could say, different layers as far as higher register voices, and then you had your lower register voices, and then you had some panning going on. So I used some compression there to kind of tame the dynamics and to make it sound more consistent. And it looks like I ended up using the Focusrite console on this. I don't think I used any compression from that, but I did add a little bit of highs to it. Honestly, I think I just put it there just to kind of have it run through the console. because it was just, I don't know what it is about Focusrite, but I just like that console. I use it sometimes just when I want to be a little, I just want to try something and just kind of add, I won't even say add a little bit of warmth, but maybe it just does something. It's just like a little secret sauce that I like to use. And I would say it's probably not even noticeable to most people because it's very subtle, but it does add a little something, a little nuance to it. Yeah, and I think all in all, I want to say it was about 8 tracks of dialogue in the intro part of that song. And he did a really great job with that, and I enjoy doing that. I enjoyed mixing that part of the song. Wow, it's amazing to me. There was a lot of stuff that I did not do that I did to the other tracks. I think you said in your notes that you wanted it to sound, you didn't want too much going on with the panning and stuff. I didn't even EQ it. I didn't even EQ the choir that much. Like, it's very like light strokes. I didn't do anything hardly to that. And I'm amazed, but it sounded good. So, it wasn't fighting against anything. I think I just kind of worked everything else around the vocals. But it's amazing to me that I didn't do that much to that. I just kind of did it off the cuff. Hey, well, I think that's it on my end. I'm so glad to be a part of this project, and I hope that you all enjoy the music. And Hans Zimmer, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for creating this work that I've been able to reference. I hope to continue to mix, and hopefully one day that you'll be able to listen to this and hopefully you will like it. And also, I am so grateful to the Lord for providing me this opportunity, and I can't thank him enough for this. So thank you for that. And thank you, Tyler, again. I hope you all have a great day.
One of my good friends, Jesse Kirkbride, really helped me out. I want to give him a quick shout out. There's a specific cue that Zimmer does in Dead Man's Chest unreleased score, and it's a low groaning dun 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 dun, and I just wanted that bass so bad. If you don't have a great bass taking the lead, then you're not doing something right. So I contacted Jesse and I was like, dude, I need some help with some bass, and can you help me out? And he was like, absolutely. And so Jesse literally same day booted up his rig and started recording what I wrote. I had the MIDI for him, and we went ahead and we just recorded him, and he was so good. We transformed the key of what the original music pass was into a different key, and we made it lower, I think. And it came out sounding awesome. Jesse went above and beyond, because then he did the electric guitar solo for the Kraken melody that I do at the end of the trailer music, which was like the cherry on top. Jesse, if you're listening to this, thank you so much. And for everyone out there, go check out Jesse's work. He's an amazing musician and audio engineer as well. So I just want to say one last thing. Thank you to the Tlopo dev team. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart, this update was so awesome to work on. It was electrifying. There were so many late nights all together. I remember being in the voice chat in Discord, and like people would show up late at night, 1 a.m., and we'd be listening to the music. We'd be seeing what somebody else was working on. It was really fun working on this, and it wouldn't have been possible without the collective team behind this. To all the devs, you know who you are. You put a lot of work into this just as well as we did. This is just actually for you, the community, to know this is the tip of the iceberg. There were so many developers that worked on every little different piece that went into this. There was developers that worked on the storyline, every little thing. There's back-end developers to make sure the game is running and that we can handle the code to make sure it gets out there. Like, so much. You guys don't understand in the community how much work went into this, how many late nights. And I hope that this video brings a light to that. It's kind of funny because the one thing that we all have in common on the dev team, because there's a lot of things that as a society that drives us apart. The one thing that brings us together is the love of Pirates of the Caribbean. That specifically is what I love about this game and the community. I also would like to thank you. We've read every single comment that you've said about the Kraken's Wake. We love and appreciate all your feedback. I specifically love your feedback for the music and sound. Jonathan, I'm sure, also loves the fact that you guys welcome him to your video game. Most importantly, thank you, the audience, for listening to this. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please give it a like and subscribe if you're a fan. Remember to play The Legend of Pirates Online. It's free to download, so go to the website, tlopo.com. As always, I'll see you on the next update. Until then, fair winds. Drink up, me hearties, yo-ho!
Now you're ready to sail for the Horn. Way, roll and go. Our boots and our clothes, boys, are all in the pond. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away. Way, roll and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stowed. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh. Roast her up, bunnies, the wind's drawing free. Way, roll and go. Let's get the glad rags on and drive her to sea. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away. Way, roll and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stowed. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh. Come, rest the boss, police, heave her away. Way, roll and go. Get cracking, my lad, 'tis a hell of a wake. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away. Way, roll and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stowed. To be rollicking randy dandy, oh.
Now we are ready to sail for the Horn. Way, roll and go. Our boots and our clothes, boys, are all in the pond. To be rolling randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away. Way, roll and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stored. To be rolling randy dandy, oh. Rust around the waves, the wind's drawing free. Way, roll and go. Let's get the glad rags on and drive her to sea. To be rolling randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away. Way, roll and go. The anchor's on board and the cables are stowed. To be rolling randy dandy, oh. Come rest the boats, police, heave her away. Way, roll and go. Get cracking, that is a hell of a way. To be rolling randy dandy, oh. Heave a ball, oh, heave away.
Wait, what's this? You are not amongst the living, yet neither are you dead. You are not amongst the living, yet neither are you dead.
One, two, three.
For the Legend of Pirates Online.
All right. 3, 2, 1.
We'll roll. We'll roll.
row the old chariot along, and we'll row the golden chariot along. So we'll row the old chariot along, and we'll all hang on behind.